Due to a drone attack, the Orenburg processing plant of Gazprom has temporarily stopped accepting gas from Kazakhstan. The gas was supplied from the Karachaganak field, one of the main sources for the Russian system. As a result of the fire, one of the plant's workshops caught fire. The fire was extinguished by morning, but the extent of the damage is still being assessed. Despite the incidents, Kazakhstan's domestic gas supply was not affected. Let me remind you, the General Staff confirmed strikes on 3 important targets in the aggressor state. Last night, in addition to the Orenburg gas processing plant, the defense forces also struck a fuel and lubricants depot in temporarily occupied Berdyansk. There are reports of explosions and a fire at the site. They also hit the Novokuybyshevsk oil refinery in Russia's Samara region. More than 20 types of commercial products are produced there, and the annual volume of primary processing is nearly 5 million tons. Preliminary reports indicate that it was specifically the primary oil pumping units that were hit.
Another explosive night in Russia, Ukraine's defense forces launched a series of strikes on key energy and industrial facilities, from temporarily occupied Crimea to the Volga region. Gas and oil refineries are ablaze. A high-voltage substation was attacked, leaving some regions without electricity. More details in the report by Daniil Diomin.
Once again, there is a blaze in the Samara region. Explosions rang out at the Novokuybyshevsk oil refinery. Local residents filmed the work of air defense, but the drones hit their target. Columns of smoke and fire rose above the facility.
At night, drones attempted to attack an industrial facility in the region. The infrastructure of the gas plant was partially damaged. A fire broke out in one of the workshops.
The plant is part of the NK Rosneft group. It produces jet fuel, lubricants for rocket systems and automobiles. Its capacity exceeds 8,800,000 tons per year. This is already the 4th attack on this facility since the beginning of the year. Previous strikes were recorded in March, August and September. Due to the threat of new attacks, the Russian authorities announced the carpet plan in 3 cities at once: Orenburg, Samara and Ufa. Also, on the night of October 19th, drones attacked the gas plant in the Orenburg region. The governor confirmed that after the strike, one of the plant's workshops caught fire. In the Ulyanovsk region, the Veshkaima electrical substation with a capacity of 500 kilowatts was hit. According to local authorities, 4 strike drones hit the site. There were 2 explosions and a fire broke out. Some settlements were left without electricity.
This facility connected the Ulyanovsk, Mordovia, Chuvash and Samara regions and served as a transit hub for supplying electricity from the Sizrana and Zhiguli hydroelectric power plants to the central regions of Russia.
Local media report that despite official statements about restoration, it is too early to claim that the facility is operating normally. Replacing the equipment could take several months. In Bashkortostan, there was an explosion at the Avangard military plant in the city of Sterlitamak. 3 people were killed. Thick smoke billowed over the hazardous area and the city began to smell of gunpowder. The Avangard plant manufactures ammunition, disposes of explosives and produces chemical products. The cause of the detonation has not been disclosed at this time. Meanwhile, in temporarily occupied Crimea, Ukrainian Special Operations Forces struck 2 enemy targets at once: an oil depot in Hvardiyske and the Hvardiyski plant in the Saki district.
As a result of the successful actions of the Ukrainian Special Operations Forces, the oil depot in Hvardiyske and the FDQU of the Hvardiyski plant, located in the village of Karyerne in the Saki district, were hit.
At the same time, in the Khanty-Mansisk district, new symptoms of a fuel crisis are emerging. In Surgut, there are lines at gas stations, and in Nayagan, gasoline is sold only with cards. A shortage is also being observed in occupied Crimea. Cheaper fuel is disappearing and wholesale prices are rising almost daily. A series of attacks on energy and industrial infrastructure is exposing the vulnerability of the Russian economy. Losses in the energy sector, fuel problems and disruptions in logistics are the new reality for regions far from the front line.
More about the consequences of Ukrainian strikes deep inside enemy territory, both economic and social. I will continue the conversation with our studio guest. Petro Oleshchuk, a political expert, is our guest today. As a reminder, Mr. Petro, how effective are these so-called sanctions from Ukraine, as some experts call them? And in your opinion, how effective are these strikes?
I think they are as effective as possible. This week, Budanov said that Ukrainian sanctions have done more than Western ones. I absolutely agree with that. In other words, Ukrainian special services are systematically doing what Western sanctions were supposed to do, but didn't. Because if you analyze it right now, actually, well, various Ukrainian agencies, for example, the SBU drones regularly reach not only oil refineries, but also, for instance, oil storage terminals. At first, it was a terminal in the Leningrad region, then recently in Crimea, literally last week in occupied Feodosia. There was also a strike on a terminal and an oil depot. So this is no longer just about oil refining, it's about oil export. If this is scaled up accordingly, then Russia is being deprived of its main source of income, which is what it uses to finance the war. So essentially, why does Russia, after almost 4 years, still have money to continue the war, to buy weapons, to purchase shells from North Korea, to hire mercenaries and send them to the front? Because they continue to actively sell oil. In other words, the sanctions that were supposed to affect this have, in reality, had only a weak impact. This is the reality that has allowed the Russians to continue this war of attrition. And until Ukrainians themselves took up this issue, created the necessary means of destruction, and began to systematically address it, the Russians continued to live comfortably as before. Now they are experiencing a fuel crisis, which can be scaled up. There are other related problems that they are now facing. So if this is strengthened accordingly, then the Russians would already have some pretty serious reasons to consider ending this war.
But will those reasons actually appear? We see a gasoline shortage, but so far people aren't taking to the streets.
They won't take to the streets, and we shouldn't count on that. It's a different society, a different mentality. That's not what this is about. The fuel crisis isn't about people going out into the streets over there. Let them stay home if they want. But this is about the ability to directly ensure logistics within the countries. It's about the ability, again, to maintain the normal functioning of society. That's what it's about. It's not about some kind of discontent over there, or that something will have an impact. Well, excuse me, we're talking about a state that has sacrificed a huge portion of its citizens in a completely pointless war. And this doesn't provoke any reaction in that society at all. I'm talking about something else here, but this campaign needs to continue, it needs to be scaled up. So why, once again, was Putin so afraid of those tomahawks? Well, primarily because, and by the way, our president recently mentioned this, Ukraine still cannot carry out combined attacks like Russia does, using both drones and missiles. If they were combined, they would be much more effective. It would take less time to force the Russians to adopt a more constructive and adequate position regarding their perception of reality. So basically, that's it in short. But I think no one will argue with the path that Ukraine has taken over these years. In this regard, it is colossal. And at the same time, it did this on its own. That is, while our partners are constantly thinking about where escalation is, where it ends, and where it begins. And God forbid, if a Russian drone is shot down in our own airspace, won't that be considered escalation? What if Putin doesn't get too offended if his drone is shot down in the airspace of European countries? So we've reached such an absurd point that, obviously, when there are such inadequate reactions to threats from Putin, Putin himself develops an inadequate perception of reality within which he won't respond to anything. He doesn't want to enter into real, reasonable peace agreements, because all he gets is praise, concessions, and people telling him how outstanding, smart, and brilliant he is. And it's not just his sycophants telling him this, but also numerous Western politicians, including some of the world's leading contemporary political figures.
Strikes are hitting Russia almost every day. If things continue at this pace, what will happen next? How will Putin react?
Well, you see, for now, Putin is ignoring this issue. That's his standard tactic. He always ignores any questions that are unpleasant for him. For example, he ignored the Ukrainian armed forces operation in the Kursk region for a year. Only after it was over did he start to get involved, appearing on TV in the Kursk region in camouflage and so on. It's the same situation here, so officially he will ignore this problem. Unofficially, though, we understand perfectly well that they will be forced to buy petroleum products, and they are already doing so. This will again affect the decline in revenues, because it's one thing when you have your own petroleum products and quite another when you have to buy them elsewhere. And this simply needs to continue. Ukraine simply has no other option but to keep doing this, directly impacting their revenues. I repeat, this will not affect the mood in Russia in any way. There will be no protests or anything like that. But the decline in the Russian budget's revenues is already a concrete result. The less money they have for the war, the better.